Tonight, a socialist, a pickup artist, and a beauty queen. It's December 21st, and you're watching my favorite interviews from 2015.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Welcome to the show. I may not have interviewed 4 guests a night every weeknight like I did on The Source at Sun News Network, but that didn't stop me from interviewing some amazing guests this year at The Rebel. Just a few weeks into our little startup, I had the chance to interview Noam Chomsky. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I want to interview Noam Chomsky? Well, let me tell you, Noam Chomsky is so far on the left of the political spectrum, Obama is too conservative for him. Yet his views are sought after and listened to. He's a champion of college kids everywhere. So we talked about foreign policy, Israel, and free speech. You can watch the full episode here, but let me show you my favorite part, the part that we should have agreed on, free speech. I started by asking him if the left still cares about free speech the way they claimed to do in the 60s and 70s. Professor Chomsky, what a pleasure to have you today. I'd like to talk to you about 2 things because you're an icon of free speech and of criticism of U.S. foreign policy. Both are very interesting to me. Let's talk about free speech. The left used to be associated with free speech. Does the left care about free speech now as much as they did in the 60s and 70s?
Well, the struggle for free speech in the 60s and the 70s was an effort to break through constraints against what could be articulated and what people could hear. Actually, the notion of freedom of speech is not so trivial. So take, say, the First Amendment of the Constitution. That doesn't really say very much, but the way it's been interpreted over the years, there are 2 dimensions to it. One is the freedom from government constraint. Notice that not freedom from corporate constraint, which is very severe, can give examples, but freedom from government constraint. The other dimension is the freedom to obtain information and to express oneself. Now that's different. And in fact, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations, the article, I think it's Article 19, that's concerned with this, speaks of the freedom to impart and receive information. Now, if you go back to the early history of the United States, the founding fathers were concerned with both rights. So the state policies, things like postal rules and others, were designed to permit the freest possible imparting of information, expression of opinion, but also of receiving information.
Well, Professor, I want to go back to the thing you said at first, which was that in the 60s and 70s it was about breaking through, and especially about protesting the Vietnam War and other social change, civil rights movements for African Americans. But I want to follow up on that, because it seems to me that now that the 60s leftists have broken through, have taken over the dean's offices and the highest political offices, a 60s activist, community organizer is now the president, or at least in the mold of a 60s activist. Is that why today's leftists are the enforcers of speech codes, whereas in the 60s they were protesting outside the dean's office? Now they're the ones with the politically correct speech codes because they got their way, so they don't need the tool of free speech anymore. It was just a temporary weapon to smash the conservative hegemony.
I don't think that's true at all. The constraints on breaking through to the public are probably greater than they were in or at least comparable to what they were in the 60s.
So where are the leftist free speech activists today? Aren't they now the enforcers of political correctness on conservative ideas on gender or sexual orientation? Aren't there more speech codes being enforced by leftists now than ever before?
That's a dramatic exaggeration.
Okay, well, how big a problem
Real
is it?
restrictions on freedom of expression and come from the corporate sector, the state sector, and they're pretty rigid. So nothing prevents me from saying in the United States that the Iraq War was the worst crime in the 21st century, but I can't publish. I can only reach very marginal audiences on what is a pretty obvious fact. You can say in the United States within the mainstream that the Iraq War was a strategic blunder, as Obama did, but try saying that it's a crime of aggression of the kind that led to the hanging of Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg. Try to write an op-ed about that.
But aren't you confusing things, Professor? Aren't you saying my power to force someone else to carry my views is my lack of that power to make ABC, CBS, NBC carry my views is a form of censorship? That's not censorship, that's their right to be free from your views. Whereas if you said certain things on campus about sexuality, about women or minorities, you wouldn't just face a lack of media that would carry your views, you would face student misconduct hearings, you would be expelled, you would be drummed out of institutions. I'm not talking about someone refusing to print your op-eds, I'm talking about someone proactively gagging you.
It is a very marginal phenomenon on campus which barely exists, but there's a major phenomenon, and that is the virtual monopolization of the major media by private corporate entities.
But what about the internet? I mean, you're huge on the internet. You can go around them.
May I continue?
Please do, yes.
Radically restricts the opportunity for for expressing opinion and providing information. It's true that you can get around it in peripheral ways, but this is an enormous constraint on freedom of speech. I can give you, let me give an example of one of the cases that's not regarded, interestingly, as constraint on freedom of speech. I've published a number of books with colleague Edward Herman of Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. The first book we published was published by a small but profitable textbook publisher. It was called Counter-Revolutionary Violence. They published 20,000 copies of it. The advertisements for it reached one of the executives in the big conglomerate, Warner Communications, now part of Warner Brothers, that owned the publisher. He didn't like it. He ordered the publisher to not to distribute the book. When they refused, he put the entire publisher out of business, destroying all of their stock. Is that a constraint on freedom of speech? Yeah, but it's not considered that because it's not state censorship.
Well, Professor, I mean, you talked about 20,000 copies of a book. I predict our discussion here will have more than 20,000 views. I mean, I think you're disregarding the democratization of the internet that allows anyone with a blog or a YouTube page or even a Facebook page to talk to literally millions. Do you discount that?
No, of course I don't discount it. In fact, I've written about it, but it remains the case that overwhelmingly the media that reach the general public are under corporate control and highly restrictive.
Are you not a form of a celebrity? Are you not a star? If I thought of the top 10 academics in terms of their reach and the passionate following they have, despite this corporate embargo that you referred to, I would put it to you that you've been enormously successful. Your ideas have found great purchase. Aren't you a living disproof of your theory?
Not at all. In fact, it has nothing to do with me. It's quite general. I mentioned one example describing accurately the Iraq War, virtually impossible in the major sources of information in the United States. Same with the Vietnam War. I mean, you mentioned the Vietnam War before. Did the left win that? I mean, is it possible to point out in the major media, and if so, please tell me where, that that under John F. Kennedy, the United States invaded South Vietnam, carried out a major act of aggression, which then expanded to the point where it destroyed virtually all of Indochina in the worst crime since the Second World War. Tell me where you've seen the phrase invasion of South Vietnam in the mainstream media.
I think that most movies about war, both in the Vietnam era and certainly in the Iraq era, I mean, there's American Sniper on the one hand, but I could name you 10 anti-war films. Are we watching the same mainstream media? Like most on the left, it seems Chomsky is only for free speech if you agree with him. Don't go away. My next favorite interview has felt the full force of censorship from social justice warriors, but he doesn't back down. I don't agree with everything he says, but I just couldn't resist interviewing him after his events in Toronto and Montreal were shut down, or at least were tried to be. That's next. Stay with us. This summer, the pickup artist, known as Roosh, was on tour and making plans to come to Toronto and Montreal. Roosh runs a blog with videos and articles that give tips to men on how to pick up dates, and women find this offensive. They even started a petition to kick him out of Canada, and politicians and the media jumped right on board. I gotta say, I was intrigued. Here's what Roosh says he's really trying to do.
What game is a response to women no longer seeking a husband and no longer wanting to be a wife and mother, no longer wanting to settle down with a good man. It is a response to a culture that is now enabling and encouraging them to, when they're young, have as much fun as they want, sleep with all the exciting men that they can find while pursuing money, career, and jobs and entertainment. So that's what game is. It's like, well, if a woman doesn't want a good man anymore, if she doesn't want a husband and kids anymore when she's in the prime of her physical life at 21, 22, what does she want? Well, she wants sex, casual sex, meaningless sex, shallow sex with exciting men. So we have to account for that. And the response that we give in turn is how to be the men that the modern woman who primarily seeks entertainment, what she wants in a man. And look, I look back to some of the things I did when I was young with the one-night stands and the notches and things such as that. And I think, wow, that was a shallow way to live. But they say that the palace of wisdom goes through the road of excess. I exceeded what my sexual need was in the most shallow way I could. So that has allowed me to have the wisdom now to find out where the line is and what is healthy for both women and men.
You know, I've read some of your columns, and it seems to me, and sometimes you talk about men wearing the clown face or putting on an act, it almost seems to me like a lament. Now maybe it's just covering up the hedonistic joys of promiscuity, but it seems to me that you almost lament having to find this scheming, gaming way to connect with a woman. You've written about Eastern European countries like Poland and Ukraine, places where are not as feminized in the political sense as the West, and you say you find those places more appealing. Is that because they're sort of maybe 40 years ago, 50 years ago in their dating morality?
You know, I look back to what my dad had to do to get my mom. All he had to do was have a job and take a shower every day. He could be himself completely. He didn't have to be entertaining, exciting. He didn't have to be bad. He didn't have to be a DJ with six-pack abs. So all he had to do was be a good man, and it worked. But now if you try to be a good man, you won't even get laid. You won't even get a date, because women have been encouraged to chase after this really narrow ideal of what an attractive man is. And am I sad that when I have to interact with a woman and have some kind of intimacy with her, start a relationship with her, I have to put a clown mask and be this entertaining ideal that she now wants. Yes, why can't I just be myself? Why can't I be a man that has character, honor, that is honest, that wants to treat his woman good, that wants to treat his family good? Why can't I just be a normal man? Why do I have to make all these jokes and dance up and down? Why do I have to pretend that my life is so exciting and I've done this exciting thing, so maybe she thinks my status is actually high? And look, I'm not saying that I deserve a girl who's a 10 out of 10. But if I worked on myself, my resources are fine, and I am ready to give value, I see no reason why I should have to move heaven and earth and spend 1,000 hours mastering the art of game just to get a girl who is kind of cute, because men of the past, they did not. So when I travel to Eastern Europe, where survival is not as easy there you can't be a student that's majoring in sociology or women's studies and have a comfortable life like they can here. So they actually look to men with good values and who has a good job, who in a partnership, they can have a good life together. So in that case, I don't have to dance as much there. I don't have to be more entertaining than her smartphone, which is loaded with Instagram and Facebook and so on. So there I can just say who I am, be myself, and hope that a natural connection happens. But in the US, a natural connection will not happen unless you really figure out how to scratch the itch of what these modern women want.
What I find the most interesting about Roosh is he seems to long for traditional values. He claims he's just responding to society, to the modern women he meets. What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comments below, or email me at Ezra@TheRebel.media. Coming up, don't go away, a beauty queen banned from entering China, where the finals in her pageant were taking place. What she did that upset the communist regime is next on my favorite interviews of 2015.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Anastasia Lin was set to represent Canada in the Miss World Beauty pageant, but she was barred from entering China, where the finals were taking place. Why? Because she is an outspoken actress and activist about human rights abuses in China. Here's her story of sticking up for freedom, even with the communist regime sending threats to her father still in China.
So basically, all of us, all the contestants, needs an invitation letter from China in order to apply for a visa. So far, I am the only person I know of have not received this invitation letter from the Chinese government, and we're about 7 days away from the cutoff line for the visa application.
Now, you would think that China would be very proud to have a Chinese Canadian come back to the world pageant in China, but obviously there's a political wrinkle here. Tell me what happened when you won the Miss World Canada Championship. You got a text message from your father in China, am I right?
Yes, that's right. So in the past, I have been participating in film and TV works that are portraying the human rights issue that are in China. There's not a lot of actors that have the guts to do it. So I thought I have the monopoly of these kind of roles for a while. But at that time, I really didn't think there's any consequences in doing these films.
So these were pro-democracy, civil rights commentary films, is that right?
They portray the victims under the communist regime, especially those suffered religious persecution.
Is this with our friends at NTD TV, or where were these programs? We have friends at New Tang Dynasty TV and Epoch Times who shine a light of scrutiny. Were you doing these films with them or somewhere else?
Some are with NTD TV, but it's not really. Some are with New Realm Studio, and some are with. I went to Sweden to do one of those, and Vancouver.
Would you call yourself an actress or a spokesperson?
Actress, for sure.
So, but obviously someone had been tracking you if there was a problem, right? I mean, so tell me how it went. So you were an actress who did these parts about freedom and democracy in China. You won the Miss World Canada pageant, and then you got a text message. What did the text message from your dad say?
It says that if you don't stop these human rights and political work right away, we will have to go our separate ways. I was like, what? And he said, the security force approached me, and if you don't stop, our family would receive consequences. So
you're here with your mom, your dad's in China, and he, now do you think he was saying this under duress? Like, do you think they were forcing him to say this, or do you think he was just so scared, he said, please stop because I'm in danger?
Well, he said that the security force approached him. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a vague threat.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
So have you been in touch with your dad lately?
Yes, lately. At the beginning, he was very nervous. For a few months, we didn't really speak. But afterward, he relaxed a little bit. He was really cheerful. He thought it was a great thing I'm going back to China. And he wanted to organize a cheerleading team for me. And in November 2nd, I received a text message from him saying, it's better if you don't come back.
Really?
Yeah, it's better if you don't enter than coming here, because there might be endless trouble. And it's quite shocking.
Now, have you received any support from the Canadian government? I mean, obviously, countries are sovereign nations. They have a ultimate sovereign right to keep out whoever they like. But if China is starting to block Canadians, you're Canadian citizen, I take it. If China is blocking Canadian citizens, especially of Chinese origin, who simply speak out for civil rights, that is a bad trajectory. Have you received any support from a new member of parliament, from the Department of Foreign Affairs? Has any Canadian official of any sort come to your aid?
Back in May and June, when my father's news broke out, the Canadian government wrote a statement supporting me, commending my efforts to raise awareness about this issue and also express concern about my family's situation in China. But right now, my visa is getting delayed, and I have not heard any supportive comments from the government directly. And they have said that they can't comment on a foreign visa issue. But this is not a foreign visa issue. It's not a matter of foreign sovereignty. I am Canadian speaking within my own border. I spoke my rights. I spoke my mind within Canadian border. And
have you thought of reaching out to Ashley Collingbull? You know who I'm talking about? She was that Mrs. World. Mrs. Universe, that's right. Thank you. I get confused. And she was very political. She was campaigning against Stephen Harper in the last election, but she seems very political. Do you think she might use her media platform to help bust open the doors to China for you?
I have not reached out to her, but that would be great.
I think you should give it a try. I mean, she is no friend of conservatives, but I think she puts herself forward as a friend of civil rights and democracy. I think you should give her a call.
Yeah, and also conservative, liberal, I don't think this is a partisan issue.
No, it's not at all.
We used to have a prime minister that stood up for our right and said, I am a Canadian, free to speak without fear.
Right, that was Wilfrid Laurier, I think. Or
Diefenbaker. That's right, and that's actually the quote I used in my 2013 pageant.
Oh, really?
I uphold this value of freedom for myself and all mankind. And I am doing exactly that. And I think I shouldn't be left alone to defend what is at the core value of our country by myself.
Well, I'm impressed with what you're saying. I'm impressed that you would refer to freedom in a pageant. I think you truly have Canadian values, and it doesn't surprise me that the world's largest dictatorship would want to keep you out, especially if you could inspire other Chinese people to embrace freedom. How do you think this is going to end? You say you only have 7 days left to get the visa. What will happen if Canada is not represented there?
I don't know. The worst possible scenario is that when people watch this and it ends badly, it might discourage them from speaking up in the future. In the long term, it can be extremely unhealthy. People won't be able to speak up anymore. And that's why I'm continuing on this path. It's not even about the beauty pageant anymore. It's just a matter of principle.
Well, that's outstanding. I'm glad to meet you. I wish you good luck. I'm worried because I don't know if Canada has great champions for democracy and human rights in foreign affairs these days. I hope so. And I hope that you'll be able to go to China. But if not, well, Canada's lucky to have a democracy activist like you around. Nice to meet you, Anastasia. What an amazing young woman. She truly knows what free speech means. And to give an update on her story, her visa never came through. She was, in fact, denied entry into China. She continues to speak out against this censorship. Coming up, still ahead, more of the Ezra Levant Show after the break.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Don't get me wrong, I've got lots to say, but there sure were some interesting interviews over the past year. And now with the new Ezra Levant Show, I'll have a chance to show even more. Did I miss any of your favorites? Is there someone you'd like for me to try to get an interview with? Send me an email or comment below. Thanks for watching. Keep fighting for freedom.